Hello everybody, welcome to week 2 of LEA439. Hope that week, the first week went well for everyone. We're progressing along really well as we enter our second week, and if you need any assistance as always, please let me know, either on the forums or william.forbes@faculty.ashford.edu. Don't let things go too far along if you're needing some assistance without asking for some help. That's what I'm here for. This week, second week of the course, we have in the Police Union Power, Politics, and Confrontation in the 21st Century, we have chapters 14, Principles of the Police Union Endorsement, How to Assist the Candidate, and chapter 15 and 16, an important question to ask about endorsement. In order to complete the assignments for this week, you also have to read chapters 3, 4, 8, and 9 of Police Labor Management Relations, and there are also some supplementary readings in the guide for the course. So let's take a look at the topics this week. It has been said that if you want to stir up controversy in a conversation, bring up one of two topics, politics or religion. We don't really see religion issues in police unions, but politics certainly is there. This is particularly true when it comes to supporting a political candidate. Candidates actively seek endorsements from unions, particularly police unions, as it can mean an increase in campaign fund contributions and can be a potential block of voters. However, fighting from within the union can result as disagreements are likely. Everybody has their candidates that they like. Politics is a personal issue. Some argue that political involvement negatively impacts the profession of policing, and so that kind of factors in as well. Unions and politicians are permanently linked, though. Candidates are seen as supporting safety if they are able to gain police union support, as many in the public see union support as equal to police support. For unions, politics is part of the quest for power. Many police officers are reluctant to participate in the political support process at all. There is a natural disdain for politics based upon legal changes, cuts in funding, salary and benefit reductions in fights, and things like that. Education from the union leadership about why it is important to influence these issues, as well as the collective bargaining process, is necessary, and politics is part of the influence. Care and caution needs to be exercised when the endorsement of a candidate is concerned. Selection should be made very carefully. Incumbents provide a track record for the union to consider. How have they voted? Have they voted the way that the union supports? An endorsement shouldn't be taken lightly. Once provided, you can't really take an endorsement back without a great deal of controversy. Moving an endorsement around to different candidates reduces the loyalty of politicians to that union's causes in the future. It hurts the relationship. Now, endorsement should be based upon a sound screening process. If a formal review of every vote levied by the candidate is not possible, there should be a questionnaire or a review panel for the candidates to determine which way do they lean. These can be used to help the police union decide where their endorsement will fall. Endorsements are based upon the union's goals and not individual beliefs. This is the tough part of endorsements. An endorsement is not the same as an individual vote. Union members can vote any way that they wish, even if they endorse a different candidate. Union members do, on average, vote in more elections than the general public, according to Bennett and Orzechowski. But endorsing a candidate you don't support as an individual is a tough pill to swallow for union members. The selection of a candidate is only the beginning, so what does the union do to show its support for the candidate? The text talks about different routes. A letter of support is perhaps the weakest demonstration of an endorsement, but an endorsement nonetheless. It has value to the candidate. A media presence and endorsements cost very little to the union, but provides a longer lasting level of support for the candidate. This requires that the union leadership be out front with a variety of media outlets in their endorsement. Now, moving up the scale of importance, Money is what drives elections. Like it or not, strong unions have political action committees that can drive funding toward campaigns, which is obviously highly appreciated by the candidate. Providing footwork in an election, perhaps in conjunction with monetary support, is also a powerful demonstration of support, likely to build strong political bonds with the candidate. This could include door-to-door discussions, phone calls to voters, or even planting yard signs. The more sweat involved in supporting a campaign, the more controversial the action may be to union membership, though, as well. Passive support is one thing, but members may resist direct involvement, an issue the leadership of the union must overcome. The monetary funding isn't the sole factor in a union's political power, though. A well-organized union lacking funds can still make a political impression. This is a quote from Heldman. To the extent that it may be important to measure a group's absolute or relative political standing, the best criterion is the power of the effort to force particular outcomes, not the amount of effort itself. End quote. To Lord Burpo, Shannon and Spearing list information as the last way to support a campaign. It is interesting that the text did not explore how this could become controversial. While freedom of speech exists, police officers are conditioned to keep certain information confidential. The information in question typically does not fall into that confidential/criminal realm, but it could be information that was passed to the union in confidence by city leaders or law enforcement management. Certain information is valuable, though, and candidates will remember the support. Endorsements help a political candidate's campaign and express a union's support, but they also send a message. The message for an incumbent is, "We're happy for your continued record of support." The message for a new candidate that is supported by the union, that they are not happy with the incumbent. Either the new candidate will win or the incumbent will. Either way, the message has been delivered. The point is that an additional consideration in determining an endorsement is to figure out what message the union intends to deliver. Now, endorsements are just one way to become involved in politics. Unions can implement other measures, such as campaigns against a candidate that allege misconduct or mismanagement. O'Brien notes that, quote, political activities that pressure politicians are more effective in shifting labor demand than those activities that appeal to voters, and a conclusion from an objective study regarding the effectiveness of political activities by public unions. The structure of policing in Australia, as we look at unions in other countries, is much more streamlined than it is in the US. As a result, the structure of unions, which are known as associations there, is also much different. Only a handful of unions represent police officers in Australia, according to the US DOJ. Police commissions serve as a chief type of role. They are appointed and subject to removal by politician-led governments. As a result, commissions are beholden to these politicians, and the unions may be more apt to speak out about officer issues more than commissioners. Unlike the situation in the US, police unions in Australia are all governed by federal law. Unions in Australia do not endorse political candidates. This is effective in that they can appeal to any party, but perhaps reduces a bit of power as candidates don't actively seek their support, although an unofficial level of support likely results anyway. It's interesting that officers are represented under a two-tiered system in Australia, their local or state territory union and the national union. The national union by rule does not interfere with the actions of the locals in most matters. This is necessary to allow this type of structure to be effective. Such a structure provides power when it is needed. The federal union can garner a great deal of media attention. Now, our readings indicate that a study was conducted about the impact of unions in Australia on policing as a profession. It is interesting to note that the report recommended that the unions pay better attention to their environment, aside from strictly industrial issues like pay, benefits, and working conditions. I see similarities to the condition in the US. Technology, for example, will continue to impact law enforcement as more functions are becoming automated. How will unions react? Additionally, there is merit to driving more of the union's efforts toward professionalism in the career. This was also noted in the Australian study. The public views police officers as individuals who are dedicated toward helping the community, not just people who view the field as a job. It makes sense that the union would gain public support if they focused upon improving the service they can offer, rather than strictly focusing upon pay and other issues that might be deemed selfish by citizens. Australian unions have also been more at the forefront of serving the changing demographics that exist in policing, according to DOJ. In the U.S., by contrast, a failure to address this issue has caused splinter groups to form to serve minority officers or women, creating a dual representation by unions and lessening the power for the primary union. The PFA in Australia has formed advisory groups to accomplish the same goal of minority representation while also maintaining the strength of the union. Canada, on the other hand, has a law enforcement structure quite similar to the U.S. Both federal, via the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and local, provincial governments handle this type of duty in our neighbor to the north. The RCMP also contracts for policing services to municipalities, which is not done in the U.S. This occurs, but it is usually a state or county law enforcement agency or even another municipality and not the federal government. Union structure is somewhat cleaner than it is in the U.S., with designated unions serving the provincial officers. The RCMP does not have the right to organize and collectively bargain. A few jurisdictions maintain the right to strike, but they use it sparingly. It is interesting that the bargaining units prefer arbitration to strike. A police strike, after all, is usually met with a negative public reaction ever since Boston in 1919. Provincial unions bargain separately for the most part, but some unions have joined forces in bargaining matters in what is called pattern bargaining. This coordinated approach likely yields positive results and keeps bargaining on a fairly even plane for the different jurisdictions. Additionally, the Canadian Professional Police Organization is a centralized conduit of information regarding labor issues, including salaries, benefits, arbitration, and health and safety. How beneficial would this be to unions in the U.S. with this level of fragmentation that we have in our country? Canadian law is more favorable to collective bargaining for law enforcement. This has helped foster collaborations among unions and has served to strengthen them into what they are today. The fact that labor law in Canada is more mature and clearly defined has helped develop a better understanding of the nuances of labor relations. The author indicates that there is a level of respect between labor parties in Canada. In comparison, there is confusion in the U.S. due to disparate labor laws. This confusion breeds contention between the involved parties. Canadian law enforcement unions can participate in candidate endorsement, which introduces the political pillar of power. Endorsements are based upon union issues and also professional law enforcement interests. The political activity of police unions in Canada is not unlike the same activity in the U.S., and that can be quite controversial. The relationship between management and the union plays a significant role in the issues such as collective bargaining, grievances, and arbitrations, or even the day-to-day operations of a police agency. A couple of approaches are considered here. In police labor management relations, the first case they talk about is in Phoenix, where a cooperative atmosphere exists. It's noted that unions have had a leg up on management in some respects, not the least of which is the ability to lobby and support political candidates, one of the pillars of power. Police chiefs can't do the same, but they can foster a positive relationship with the city's elected officials and others. Similar positive relationships with the union can be helpful as well. This can be a bit challenging as some issues are naturally contentious. However, keeping the tone positive can pay dividends, not only during collective bargaining, but also when issues of mutual concern arise, things like law enforcement professionalism, defects in equipment, support for a new police facility or building, and that sort of thing. Sharing the power of the chief's office to a degree is one way to help build this relationship. Frequent meetings are beneficial, as well as participation in team building. During discussions, it is often found that the same officers who are a pain to the chief are a pain to the union president, so a mutual understanding can be found in many cases. Contrast this with the police chief described in the Detroit case study, and to be fair, this chief is in a different position, having assumed control as an outsider. Without full knowledge of the details, it's difficult to make a judgment, but it does certainly appear that the Detroit chief in this case study is facing a more difficult set of obstacles and is attempting to enact sweeping change in a heavy union environment. One can certainly understand this chief's motivations, but the phrase "a bull in a china cabinet" comes to mind with the rapid pace at which he attempted to instill changes. In making those changes, it has stirred union leadership. This disturbance might have been quelled somewhat through the inclusion of union input into the changes, but it isn't necessary to surrender power completely, but it is a good idea to involve them in the process. It's noted that the chief has invited union leadership to staff meetings, but this is different than creating a special meeting with just the union personnel, signifying their importance. The union and the chief generally agree on many issues, such as officer pay and facility and equipment deficiencies. This case illustrates just how important communication, including tone, can be in a relationship. There may not be as many differences between these two as it appears, but the methods of operation are much different. That's it for this week. I look forward to seeing you on the discussion boards, and please let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next week.